what made you start the podcast, and then what keeps you going?
So I'm going to give a nod to Pat Flynn. I was an early follower of his work, and I quickly figured out that in order to make my blog successful, I was going to have to write a lot. And while I can write, and I have written a book and hundreds of blog posts, it's not my favorite thing to do. And so when I saw that Pat started his show, I thought, well, I'm going to start one too. So that was the original vision was, well, it was going to be an easy way for me to create content, which would then attract an audience, which I would be able to then sell my stuff to. There was, and that has happened to be sure, but there was a very unexpected benefit of starting a podcast. And it's the reason why I encourage virtually everybody to start a podcast. And that is this: being a podcast host is the single greatest networking tool that I have ever discovered, for the simple reason that it enables me to email a complete stranger who I would like to have an interaction with and extend an invitation to them to be on my show. Now, it doesn't work every single time. Obviously, if I emailed Tim Ferriss, he's probably going to say no because he's got plenty of visibility on his own platform. But there are lots of people who like being on shows. It's an ego stroke for many people, I think for almost anyone. And it's a way for me to then begin building a relationship, kind of like with my laser pointer. As I mentioned to you, you can go, if you want to build your network, you can go to conferences, which is time consuming and expensive. And maybe you'll meet somebody interesting because you don't really know who's who, so to speak, unless, they got name tags on and you've done your research beforehand, but it's a little bit luck of the draw. Whereas a podcast, I can be very, very specific about who I want to reach out to and who I want to have as a guest on my show. And that has been extremely beneficial to me over the roughly decade that I've been doing it.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you say that, Trent, because I didn't have enough motivation to start the podcast, which I started this podcast just beginning of last year, just before COVID hit. So that was good timing because I didn't have to leave the office then, really, did I? So, but I totally agree with you. One of the reasons I started and was the motivation for me to start the podcast was relationship building, almost like networking on steroids, really. And you mentioned the laser point concept. I think you're exactly right. Look, I love going to conferences because of the energy and I suppose sometimes the randomness of the networking. And I quite like that randomness of networking, bumping into people that you didn't plan to or didn't think were interesting or even know were around. Some of the best people I know on the planet have come out of those random intersections at events. But I think you're absolutely right. Podcasting is number one benefit, and most fun is the networking and relationship building.